So let's continue to look at this day, what it means, particularly the trajectory going forward. Legal expert and commentator Reitumetse Benedict Phiri is a founder, managing director of IusPrudentia Specialist Counsel. He joins us now. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. I'm just going to, string a few sentences together because there is just so much to talk about, and the context is, it also keeps on shifting or evolving, whichever way you want to characterize it. So the new Chief Justice, which is Justice Raymond Zondo, one of the things that he said he would ensure was judicial independence. This is the same Chief Justice who's the head of a commission that has just handed over a final report, which in the last one also reiterates that there should be further investigations into the former President Jacob Zuma, who was incarcerated because he refused to appear before the Zondo Commission, and has accused Justice Zondo of being impartial. There has been suggestions of judicial capture. So all of these sentences, how do we make sense of it if we're saying that our judicial system is still strong, independent? Are there any hallmarks that bear evidence to allegations otherwise?
Good evening. I think certainly we do have a strong judicial system. I think just insofar as the former president's contempt of court matter was concerned, we saw the Constitutional Court really vindicating the rule of law in that respect. I think even though we do have the State Capture Commission report that is out, the former president has made it clear that he's going to take that on review. And I expect to see, again, in that particular instance, the courts really upholding the law. We're obviously not sure what his grounds of review will be from a legal perspective yet, but, we understand what the former president has threatened. But be that as it may, I think the matter will get the right judicial treatment through the courts. Similarly, when we talk about his medical parole matter, he got granted leave of appeal from the Pretoria High Court to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and that's coming up in the next couple of weeks, just under a month or so. And I think we'll see that the Supreme Court of Appeal will deal with that matter appropriately. And in the same light, his appeal to the Constitutional Court with respect to his criminal matter, I think, again, we'll see the Constitutional Court dealing with that in a way that protects the integrity of the application of the law in this country through the courts.
I think this is what the ordinary man on the street wants to understand, because the optics, depending on whom is, laying out the case or making their case, how do we know that it is resilient, particularly against political interference? The former president, on the one hand, argues that the prosecutor, state prosecutor Billy Downer, cannot be the one who presides over his case because of what he sees as a political vendetta against him. And there are those who look at the fact that the former president was incarcerated because he refused to go before the Zondo Commission as political interference. There's also the accusation that he should not have come out of prison on medical parole because he did not, or the conditions did not live muster up to what the law says, the letter of the law says in terms of what should have made him be granted medical parole. So how do we just, pull this apart and come to our own understanding beyond the various narratives being fed to us, and of course depending on the strength of the narrator?
And I like what you said about the letter of the law, because I think that is really the place to start when we start unpacking whether the law is resilient, because, if you talk about the medical parole case, in that particular matter, at least to my view, the former president should never have been afforded medical parole because that decision did not sit with Arthur Fraser, but sat with the Medical Parole Advisory Board. And he did not have the ability to usurp the Medical Parole Advisory Board insofar as the legislation is concerned. So again, I'm expecting that the letter of the law will be upheld, notwithstanding any complaints around maybe there's some political interference. I think if we just step back and look at what the law says objectively, I think we'll find that stacks up. Maybe they could be better to communicate that, even with respect to the contempt of court case. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter who you are. You cannot just ignore the judgment of a court or an order of a court. And if you do ignore an order of the court, you run the risk of being found in contempt of court and then being sent to prison, depending on how serious that contempt was. In this particular instance, was extremely egregious. And also, his willful defiance of the commission. He has said he's going to bring a review application. He did bring a review application, but he's actually never progressed that review application. And I think we can see through that, because if he really believed that Judge Zondo was biased against him and should have been removed, I think one would have expected that review application would have made its way through court, even up to now, but that hasn't been the case. Similarly with Advocate Billy Downer, in his prosecution in the criminal court case, I think we understand the reason why he would seek that kind of relief. And the allegations go back many years and have been tried in different courts, and different courts coming to the conclusion, basically, that would oust the kind of defense he's trying to, mount, or rather the attack on Advocate Billy Downer that he's trying to mount at this particular point in time. So, I think, that's how we really just articulate the robustness, because, from a legal perspective, all of these matters that have gone against the former president stack up. And it's unfortunate that the courts are being used in such a way where any decision that goes against the former president then sets up the courts for an attack, without necessarily always engaging the merits of that particular decision and what it actually sits on.
And in 2021 and leading up to the beginning of 2022 has been a very big year in terms of judging that judicial infrastructure, the construction thereof, and how it stands up to this criticism. The former president at some point this year will go before the Constitutional Court to appeal against the matter that is before the Pietermaritzburg Court. There's also the SCA case. And there are those who have lashed out at the Judicial Services Commission just in terms of it being a tool, an organ of self-correction, of fighting off some of these allegations, of proving true its resilience of independence. And just share with me your thoughts on this. So it was said that the ConCourt and the Secretary of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption or fraud in the public sector, including organs of state versus Jacob Zuma, illustrated just how complicated it is to apply the laws with regards to some of these suspicions. What are your thoughts on this?
I think certainly, we are seeing a lot of political battles play themselves out in the courts, which is really quite a contested space, and rightfully so, because the moment we see that happening, there's obviously the question of the court's deference to the other arms of government within that particular context. And it's unfortunate that of late, the courts have had to wade in into areas where, for instance, Parliament could have taken the lead, or cabinet, etc., or political parties themselves. And they've had to sort of adjudicate quite tough political questions, or rather legal questions arising from a political context. So I think It's unfortunate that the courts have had to go there, but I think it's also great for our democracy that, the courts have been the ones that have been brave enough to uphold the rule of law and give us a steer as a democracy and a rudder in this particular perspective.
Thank you so much for speaking to us about this. That there is Benedict Phiri, Reitumetse Benedict Phiri. He's a legal expert and commentator on this issue that we're talking about, including, if you recall, the matter before the Constitutional Court on whether or not to delay the local government elections. Some legal commentators say it was a perfect example of the judiciary upholding the law and the Constitution, proving that they are independent and impartial, operating without fear or favor. But of course, this debate continues in the public domain. Well,